So let's take a look at what Americans keep ignoring about Finland's school success, according to Anu Partanen. And this is the main article that your position paper will engage with. It's definitely good to make sure we understand what is different about Finland's schools so that you can consider if that's something you believe American schools should do, already does, or maybe wouldn't work for American schools. And that would be the basis of your argument. So in Partanen's introduction, we get this emphasis. She says, everyone agrees that the United States needs to improve its education system dramatically. But how? One of the hottest trends in education reform lately is looking at the stunning success of the West's reigning education superpower, Finland. Trouble is, when it comes to the lessons that Finnish schools have to offer, most of the discussion seems to be missing the point. So presumably the goal of Partanen's article is to tell us what is the point we're missing and what should we actually learn from Finland. That's what she is in some ways reporting on because she interviews a Finnish educator and examines in detail the differences between the Finnish education system and the U.S. And ultimately along the way, she does, I believe, try to convince us that this is worth considering, even if she doesn't open with a firm thesis statement. That's something we've discussed before that not all articles do, even though in college we really encourage you to lead with your thesis. So something that Partanen is really trying to communicate is the differences between Finnish schools and many American schools. It's not to say that there are no American schools that do the things that someone like Pasi Sahlberg is talking about, but that as a whole, as an education system, we're very different. So that may be something you agree or disagree with. That will be something you can take a position on in your paper. But part of Partanen's article focuses on interviewing Sahlberg, who is the director at the Finnish Ministry of Education's Center to International Mobility, author of the book Finnish Lessons, What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland? And so obviously he is an expert worth talking to here, who's both interested in how others can benefit from the successes that Finland has and has the experience to actually speak to that. So from his point of view, Partanen says that Americans are consistently obsessed with certain questions. These are the things that when we talk about improving American education, and somebody would say, well, be more like Finland, we would ask maybe these kinds of questions. One, how can you keep track of students' performance if you don't test them constantly? Because we have as students, you've had a lot of standardized testing. Number two, how can you improve teaching if you have no accountability for bad teachers or merit pay for good teachers? Number three, how do you foster competition and engage the private sector? And number four, how do you provide school choice? School choice is a huge debate in American education. Discussions about private school, public school, how do we make sure people have choices? Which ones are better? How can you change one to improve it? How do they maybe sometimes cancel each other out? There's a lot of conversations that if you did do further research, you would find, and you may already have your own opinions about that. So for Finland, Partanen tells us these are the wrong questions to ask. They did not start with, competition, school choice, testing. Their concerns, as the article tells us, were really just focusing on making sure that every single student's educational opportunity was equal. Not even just opportunity, because that would again involve choosing the right school. Instead, they made sure that every single public school was equal, as much as that can be possible. And we might research that further in another paper where we had more time. But the idea is that that emphasis on equality over excellence actually is what led to their excellence. that all of the things they did that ended up making their students so good and so successful was not a driving force of competition between schools, between students, between teachers, but instead an emphasis on equality, and that is actually what worked. And so that's the heart of Sahlberg's argument, Partanen's argument, and what they think is very different between Finnish education and American. So some of the things that the article emphasizes that may sound different depending upon your experiences in your own school. Finnish schools assign less homework and engage children in more creative play. Now that could differ in America from school to school. I've definitely heard, anecdotally, you would obviously in a larger project conduct more systematic research, but I know of students who are doing 3-4 hours of homework a night at very young ages, and yet there are other schools in America where there is no homework. So it differs from school to school, and part of Finland's idea is that this should be the same everywhere, that all of our schools should adapt to each student, but maintain a standard across the board. So there are no private schools in Finland, even at the university level. All are publicly funded, all are free. They don't believe in standardized tests. The only tests they conduct are in order to show how they compare to other countries, but it's not a part of the student experience like many of you are familiar with, maybe in American education. Those standardized tests you have every couple of years, not a thing in Finland. And then, as Partanen says, all teachers and administrators are given prestige, decent pay, and a lot of responsibility. A master's degree is required to enter the profession, and teacher training programs are among the most selective professional schools in the country. So all of the teachers in Finnish schools have a master's degree at least. You may have had teachers with masters. That doesn't automatically make them better teachers, but it is a standard that Finland is setting that is not the norm in American schools. So these are just a few of the differences. If you read the article closely, you'll take note of other things that maybe stick out to you. But these are some of the ones that Partanen really highlights that are definitely not true of all schools in America. So what do we do with that information? Well, your position paper asks you this question. Do you believe adopting aspects of the Finnish school system would improve education in the U.S., or if you're from another country, feel free to write about your own country if you want to. And then, why or why not? So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to say, yes, every single aspect of Finland should apply to America, or no, all of that's terrible, we shouldn't do anything like that. It's not often a yes or no position, and you in your position paper, which doesn't have to be very long, it's 500 to 800 words, you don't have room to talk about everything that comes up in Partanen's article. That's why I have phrased the question, adopting aspects, right? So you can choose which things you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on just standardized testing? Do you want to focus on standardized testing and homework issues or something else? So that'll be up to you. But step number 1 is to look at that question and take a position based upon reading Partanen's essay, your own knowledge about education, either from your experiences, others' experiences that you're familiar with. We all have some sense of the common educational debates, and we all have some experience, though it's anecdotal evidence, of our own education, pros and cons. So step number 2 is whatever position you've taken, you explain, you give your readers reasons why you've taken that position. So that is the part 2 question, why or why not? And that's the basis of your position paper. As someone who has read Partanen's article, is comparing Finnish education to the education you've experienced, or that others in your country have experienced? What is your position on whether or not any aspects of the Finnish school system should be adopted on a larger scale in the US, right? Maybe you prefer private schools and you want to argue that no, we shouldn't abolish them. That could also be a position you would take because that would be in response to something brought up in Partanen's article. So you've got a lot of options here. You want to limit yourself, and then you're writing a short argumentative response to these questions.